So everybody, we've posted some pictures of my truck online. Everybody's been asking a ton of questions as to how I've lowered this. And so we're doing a follow-up video, kind of describing the steps to that. A lot of this, I suppose, starts with how I actually even came across this truck. I originally purchased a 1978 D100. It was a slant 6 3-on-the-tree truck, same as this. And I built that. I've been looking for one of these Sweptline body styles, the 61 to 71 year range, for about 4 or 5 years now, and I really didn't have a whole lot of luck. I had a couple other short beds in between there, but I ended up finding the 78 short bed util line and or step side that I wanted to build. It was a slant 6 3-on-the-tree. I brought it home. I had another parts truck that I had purchased, so I yanked the slant 6 out. I put a 444 speed in it, truck 4-speed. It had an 8 1/4 rear axle, so I put a 8 3/4 in it with a 323 shirt grip. With that, it had a really bad axle hop issue, so I built a set of Caltracs for it, modified set off of a 68 B body Chrysler. So I had that. It was an awesome truck, cool truck, great patina. It just seemed like it was missing something. It wasn't very hot rodish. So I had that for a couple months. Boom ahead, I get a phone call. A friend of mine says, "Hey, I'm at this auction, and there's this truck that I think you should know about." And so sure enough, he tells me about it. I look it up online, and I see this sitting there, and it's completely stock form. The auction was 1 week away. So I rushed, sold a whole bunch of stuff, got a whole bunch of money together, just to hopefully put enough money down to be able to win this. And sure enough, I did. So there I was with this truck, which was now a slant 6 3-on-the-tree as well, plus my built 444 speed 78. With both of those there, I had them sitting side by side. I brainstormed, do I sell the 78 to fund building this? But everything that I just did to the 78, I wanted to do to this. So, made sense. I tore both of them apart, and I frame swapped this. So this is now a 68 D100 with that 78 D100 frame under it. With that, the frames, I did a whole bunch of measuring. The wheelbases on paper don't match up. The 68 is 114-inch wheelbase. The 78 is 115-inch wheelbase. I physically measured both of them to be 114 and a half. So I was perfect there. So I began turning them apart. Pulled the body off of the 78, set it aside, pulled the body off of, or the bodywork off of the 68, started with just the cab, placed that on it. I wanted to get it sitting as low as I could, so I started actually cutting up the cab. The frames themselves are a very similar shape, but the 78 is more drastic, if you will. So the body drop that I did wasn't even, but it was 2 inches from the radiator support. Front of the cab is basically on the frame, 3 inches out of the back of the cab, and then I raised the whole bed floor 5 inches. With that, I also I did a suspension drop on the 78, which you can use van lower control arms up front. They're pocketed, which gives you 3 inches up front, and then axle flip in the rear. I did that while it was still a 78. So one of the struggles that I had with this, and or struggles, or just obstacles, if you will, with the 78 having the independent front suspension over the 68 being leaf springs with that solid I-beam front axle, I had to do quite a bit of cutting on the inner fender wells to clear the new suspension, as the frame on the 78 kicks up a lot higher and comes back down to the radiator support. So with that, we can take a look underneath the hood. The inner fenders on this are mostly, they unbolt, so that's really all I had to modify in here, but I had to cut them out to clear the independent front suspension now. And then the radiator support naturally just fit quite well. I cut the center of that out, which is now all hidden behind the bumper. So one of the things I wanted with my truck, I didn't want it to look like it's been completely cut up. So I wanted a sort of natural looking bed. The kick up on the 78 frame over the rear axle, since it's higher, I had to modify the bed somehow. And I played around with the ideas of doing either hump in the center or raising just the center itself of the bed. None of the options I liked very much, until finally it just hit me one night when I was getting ready for bed. I I brainstormed how to raise the whole bed floor up. So amongst that, and now I have exactly what I wanted, which was a very normal looking bed until you start looking at it closer. And when you look at it closer, I raised it 5 inches to clear the whole frame. With that, that's where I have a step at the back now, and then my wheel wells are 2 inches from the top of the frame rail, or top of the bed rail, versus the 7 inches that it used to be. Alright, so one of the other issues I ran across was the 78 frame had a saddle tank in it. The saddle tank, being that it was a single cab short bed truck, the saddle tank went right up against the rear cross member for the transmission. While they have the cutout provisions for dual exhaust to run through, with the tank being right up against it, I had no room for dual exhaust. So one of my solutions I came up with was a fuel cell. And a fuel cell to me was rather boring. So to get past that, I decided to go with a keg. And I thought it was fun and cool. And with this keg, I actually do have a fuel pickup. It's siphon feed, vented cap, and then I do actually have a fuel gauge in this as well. And since I was then able to put the fuel tank in the bed, that opened up the possibility for dual exhaust underneath. So with the long tube headers that I have, which was meant for the 78 frame, the 78 step side used to just dump before the rear axle. Well, it was so droning inside the cab of the Sweptline, I decided I wanted to go out the side. Out the back was just kind of too boring to me. But with that, I am only 6 inches off the ground. So to run my 3-inch exhaust and to have clearance between the bed would have only put me about 2.5 inches off the ground. So that was not going to work. So I decided to go through the bed. And I made these aluminum plates, screwed them on, and mounted the exhaust where it comes out beautifully.